Hi there, I'm Lisa Bain, host of the Angel Moms podcast, and I want to welcome you to this week's episode where we're diving deep into the topic of guilt. Now, if you're a bereaved mom, no matter how long you've been on this journey, you have probably experienced this feeling. Regardless of the reason, the cause of your child's passing, you have probably asked yourself, was there something that I could have done to prevent my child from passing away? Whether it was medical reasons, whether it was suicide, whether it was a car accident or an accident of some kind, whether it was mental health issues. It is so very, very normal for grieving mothers to ask themselves these questions. Now, I want to share with you my story just real briefly, because I think it's really important that you know that I'm not just standing on a pedestal saying that it's going to get better, that I have walked every step on this journey that you are as well. I may be further into my journey than you. I might be further behind you. But I think everything comes in understanding the context and what other people have experienced. So Katie was 17 and a half years old. She was in grade 12. She was excelling at school. She was excelling at life. Everything was going great. In fact, of the two kids that I have, she was the one I didn't worry about. But she went out on a regular Tuesday night and she never came home again. She was involved in a head-on collision, a car accident. And there were days, many, many, many days when I asked myself, what could I have done? I could have prevented her from going out that night. I could have said, no, it's Tuesday. You don't need to run that errand. I could have taken her car to the car wash or filled it up with gas so that her car wasn't here. Everything in hindsight seems so clear, right? It seems like if we had just done that one thing, if they just hadn't gone out with those other kids, if they just hadn't taken that drug, whatever it was in your situation, that our children would still be here. Hindsight is very helpful after the fact, but in the moment, it doesn't help us at all. When we ask those questions, it makes us seem like we're all-knowing gods. I should have known. I should have seen this coming. I should have prevented this. When in reality, we didn't have that information at the time. If we did, surely to goodness, we would have prevented anything that we had the power to prevent. So the night before Katie's accident was a regular Monday night, and I had the worst, ugliest argument with my daughter that night. It was senseless. Back in those days, 9 years ago, I had the privilege of having a house cleaning company coming into my home every second week. And if my kids had their rooms picked up, cleaned, tidied, so that the cleaners could go in there and actually do the cleaning, then they earned the privilege to have their room cleaned. But if their room was not tidied, it was not picked up, the cleaners were told to bypass their rooms and the kids would have to clean it on their own. So it seemed like a pretty easy thing, right? To expect them to have their rooms tidy. But on that Monday night, I asked Katie to please tidy up. The cleaners were coming the next day, and she argued that she had way too much homework to do. She couldn't do it. And she got very angry with me. And in turn, I got very angry with her. And it just exploded into this senseless, stupid teenage daughter mother argument, which I have beat myself up over hundreds of times in the last 9 years. But I've also come to realize that, unfortunately, it was a normal moment in the life of a teenage girl and her mother. I didn't mean anything malicious. I didn't intend for anything to happen to Katie. I didn't say anything anything malicious like that, but it was a terrible argument. And the next day, um, we all went to work, we all went to school, and Katie came home. We had dinner together, and then she went out. She went out to do an errand, and she died before I can apologize for that argument. She died before I could say, I love you, or I miss you, or, please drive safely, any of that stuff. So I have carried an immense amount of guilt around that conversation. Now, I will tell you that as mothers, we are hardwired to believe and to know that one of our jobs as a parent is to keep our children safe, right? And I remember falling apart in a counselor's office saying, I had one job to do as a parent, and I failed. I failed my daughter, and my daughter died. And I remember the therapist looking at me and validating my feelings and all of that. But she said, but did you deliberately put Katie in harm's way? Did you do something to her car, to make sure that she would have this accident? Did you set this up in any way? Which, were awful questions. But of course I said, no, it was a regular Tuesday night. She went out to do errands. That was it. And she said, you need to remind yourself when you feel guilt like this, that you did nothing to put Katie in harm's way, that you did nothing deliberately to cause this. Even unintentionally, you did nothing. This is not your fault. So that was a big pivot for me. The second thing that I had to do was forgiveness. I had to forgive myself. Even though I didn't do anything to cause Katie's accident, I had to forgive myself as a human. I had to forgive myself as a parent. Because I don't know about you, but I circle back a lot and I think about the things I said, the things I didn't say, the things I did, the things I didn't do that weren't perfect as a parent. I could have done that better. I should have handled that situation better. I don't know a single person who is a perfect parent or a perfect human. And I had to forgive myself. I mean, as I've said to my son, when we learn, when we know better, we do better, right? So I've tried to become a better parent by realizing the things that I could have done better with her. So forgive yourself. Cut yourself some slack. Give yourself some grace. You did the best you could at the time with the information you had. It's as simple as that. And I know I've talked about this in other episodes, but that's what it boils down to. We could not see into the future. If we could, we would have done everything in our power to prevent this, but we don't have that power. I mean, do you know what the winning lottery ticket numbers are at the upcoming draw? Probably not. Do you know what your spouse is thinking, your boss is thinking, your best friend is thinking? No, none of us have that power. So we have to let that go, that we could have prevented our children's death. Unfortunately, very unfortunately, these things do happen and it's out of our control. And the third thing that we need to do, I've mentioned this already, is give ourselves grace. And what that means is to be compassionate with ourselves. You would never sit down with a best friend and point fingers and blame and make them feel bad about a situation that was out of their control, would you? You wouldn't say, this is your fault. You did this. How could you? You wouldn't. You would say exactly the opposite. And we need to do that to ourselves. Be compassionate. And when you get stuck in that spiral of guilt, you need to come back to that question like I did. Did I do anything intentionally? No. And you need to remind yourself. And there's another layer of guilt that I want to talk about because it's really important. And it's this guilt of moving forward, this guilt of living or of laughing or anything. We feel guilty. And I remember that first year or two, if I went to a barbecue, if I found myself giggling at a Friends episode or a silly TV program, I felt guilty. What's wrong with me? How dare I feel a minute, a second of happiness, of joy, of laughter? What's wrong with me? There's nothing wrong with you. We can feel these things. It's okay. It doesn't mean that we love our kids any less. It doesn't mean that we've forgotten them. It doesn't mean that we've moved on. We're human beings. We're complex. We've got a million different emotions and thoughts going on at all times. And we don't have to hold ourselves into this stuck place of pain and agony and guilt and grief. Granted, the grief is a normal thing. It's normal. We can validate it. We can feel it. We can be it for a while. But when things start to change, and they will change if you allow them, you might find yourself having some okay days or some okay moments. And in time, those might become good days or good moments. And they can keep moving that way if you allow it. There's no need to feel guilt. I think it's the love that connects us to our children, not the pain, not the guilt. Years ago, like probably within the first year of Katie's passing, I went to see a psychic medium. And after the reading, which was phenomenal, she left me with this parting thought. She said, Lisa, give your daughter something amazing to watch. And by that, she meant give her lots of laughter, give her lots of smiles, show her that you are living, because that is going to make her smile. That is going to have her close by. So that is what I try to do, is give her something amazing to watch. Do I do it every day? Probably not, but that is my goal. Now, I do want to invite you to something that I have just started in early 2025. And that is the Angel Moms online community. And it's an inexpensive group for bereaved moms online. So you can participate from anywhere in the world, where we can come together. I do Facebook Lives and I answer your questions and we support one another. It's community and connection. So if that's something that interests you, go check it out at www.griefsupportformoms.com/group. And I will put that in the description below as well. So in summary, give yourself grace, Angel Mom. Make sure to forgive yourself. You have nothing to feel guilty about. Until next time, take care, Angel Mom.